When Russian forces crossed into Ukraine on February 24, 2022, Vladimir Putin expected his special military operation to last 3 days, maybe a few weeks at most. The plan was textbook Russian doctrine: decapitate the Ukrainian government, seize Kyiv, and install a puppet regime before NATO could even react. But 3.5 years later, Ukraine not only survived, it's systematically dismantling what was once touted as the world's second most powerful military, and it's costing Russia everything. Putin's invasion followed old Soviet playbooks, a fatal mistake given Ukraine's decades inside that very system. Ukrainian commanders knew those tactics by heart, and from the first day, they turned Russia's predictability into a devastating weakness. The Battle of Hostomel Airport should have been Russia's lightning victory, a rapid airborne assault meant to seize an airfield just outside Kyiv and open a supply corridor straight into the capital. But Ukraine was ready. When those 34 Russian helicopters carrying hundreds of paratroopers arrived, they flew into a death trap. Ukraine had fortified the area with radar-guided defenses, portable anti-air systems, and a runway blocked with debris. What was supposed to be a swift takeover turned into a massacre in the sky. Though Russian forces briefly captured the airport, the runway was destroyed, the air bridge never opened, and Kyiv held firm. Within weeks, the Russian advance collapsed under its own weight, marking the first major failure in Putin's 3-day war. From there, Ukraine exploited Russian rigidity again and again, but none more brilliantly than during the Kharkiv counteroffensive in September 2022. As the world watched what appeared to be a major Ukrainian push toward Kherson in the south, Ukrainian generals were quietly staging their real attack in the northeast. The Kherson offensive was a masterstroke of deception. Russia redeployed some of its best units southward, leaving Izium and Kupiansk exposed. Then, on September 6th, Ukraine struck hard in Kharkiv Oblast, advancing nearly 5 miles a day, an operational tempo unheard of in modern warfare. Within 6 days, Ukraine liberated over 1,100 square miles, retook strategic railway hubs, and captured vast amounts of Russian equipment. Entire Russian formations simply vanished, and for the first time since World War II, Moscow's army was in full retreat. Back in the capital, Moscow's citizens celebrated the city's anniversary in ignorance, while their army suffered one of the worst defeats in Russian history. Fast forward to August 2024, and Ukraine pulled off an even bolder move: the Kursk Incursion. It was audacious, a cross-border attack into Russian territory itself. Ukrainian forces captured around 480 square miles of land inside Kursk Oblast, more than Russia had managed to seize from Ukraine in the entire year. The operation's impact went far beyond the map. It shattered Russia's illusion of invulnerability, forced Moscow to divert tens of thousands of troops away from active fronts, and, most importantly, destroyed Western fears that striking Russian territory would trigger nuclear escalation. When Putin didn't launch nukes in response, that red line disappeared. Within months, Western nations began supplying Ukraine with F-16, Mirage 2000s, and long-range missile systems, now cleared for strikes deep into Russia. By mid-2025, Ukraine was still holding parts of Kursk, while Russia had resorted to calling in alleged North Korean reinforcements who proved embarrassingly ineffective. But perhaps Ukraine's greatest revolution wasn't on the ground, it was in the air, and it came in the form of drones. What started as desperation turned into a technological renaissance. In 2022, Ukraine's defense industry was worth about $1 billion. By 2025, it had exploded to $35 billion. Nearly a third of Ukraine's military needs are now produced domestically, with drones leading the charge. From cheap FPV kamikaze drones that cost a few $1,000s but can destroy tanks worth millions, to sea drones that forced Russia's Black Sea Fleet to flee Crimea, Ukraine has turned ingenuity into dominance. By 2025, up to 80% of Russian battlefield casualties came from drones. The crown jewel of this campaign was Operation Spiderweb in June 2025, 5 simultaneous strikes on Russian air bases that crippled nearly a third of Russia's strategic bomber fleet. These drones weren't Western donations. They were homemade innovations, guided by real-time mobile networks, their signals hidden within civilian data traffic to evade detection. Behind this, success is a decentralized defense ecosystem, a network of 900 Ukrainian suppliers ranging from factories to garage workshops. Through coordination platforms like Brave One, innovations are shared and implemented across the country in days, not years. This speed of adaptation has become Ukraine's most lethal weapon. Western aid was still crucial to keep Ukraine alive long enough to innovate. The arrival of HIMARS rocket systems in mid-2022 changed the battlefield overnight, allowing Ukraine to hit targets 50 miles away with pinpoint accuracy. Dozens of Russian ammunition depots, command centers, and supply lines were wiped out. Each strike didn't just destroy equipment, it crippled entire sectors of the Russian front. Patriot missile batteries later gave Ukraine the power to shoot down what Russia once bragged were unstoppable hypersonic Kinzhal missiles. By 2025, Ukraine had 7 Patriot systems defending major cities, saving countless lives. And when the first F-16s arrived in August 2024, once obsolete jets destined for scrap yards, they were reborn into lethal air superiority fighters through midlife overhauls and integration with modern weapons. Ukrainian pilots quickly proved their skill, even downing Russian cruise missiles mid-air with their cannons. France's Mirage 2000-5 fighters joined soon after, bolstering Ukraine's aerial resilience. Western armored vehicles, precision missiles like Javelin and Storm Shadow, and relentless training programs all played key roles. But the real victory lay in how Ukraine learned to adapt faster than Russia could respond. Still, Ukraine knows it can't win a war of attrition on manpower alone. Determination can't replace strategy. Commanders have adopted smarter rotations to avoid exhaustion, careful artillery use to dodge counter-battery strikes, and dispersed command posts hidden in civilian areas for rapid relocation. Ukrainian troops rely heavily on drones for reconnaissance, allowing small mobile units to outmaneuver larger Russian forces. Increasingly, even logistics are handled by ground drones, wheeled, tracked, and legged robots that can deliver supplies or evacuate wounded soldiers over long distances without risking human lives. In a war where every movement is watched from the sky, these machines have become indispensable. Ukraine's focus isn't on holding every inch of land. It's on making every Russian advance so costly that numerical superiority becomes meaningless. And the numbers prove it's working. By early 2025, Russian territorial gains had plummeted to just 78 square miles in March, down from 165 in January. Worse for Moscow, each square kilometer now required 5 times more assaults than 6 months earlier. Russia's offensive capability is bleeding out, one failed assault at a time. On the hardware front, Russia's situation is dire. Analysts estimate it's lost more than half its military equipment, about 23,000 vehicles and systems destroyed, damaged, or captured, compared to 10,000 for Ukraine. Many of Russia's losses came from decades-old Soviet stockpiles that are now running dry. Out of the roughly 12,000 tanks Russia started with, it's resorted to reactivating T-62s and even T-34s, relics of World War II, have been spotted on transport trains. While Moscow can produce around 250 modern tanks and 460 infantry vehicles a year, it's losing them faster than it can replace them. And that's just the hardware problem. Economically, Russia is unraveling. Its oil and gas revenues, once the lifeblood of the Kremlin, fell by 35% in 2025, while military spending consumed 40% of the national budget, the highest share since the Soviet era. Putin has already admitted cuts are coming in 2026 because the money simply isn't there. Ukraine's drone strikes on Russian refineries have wiped out 17% of refining capacity, driving up costs and slashing exports. Add the EU's price cap on Russian oil, dropping prices below $50 per barrel, and the result is a shrinking war chest. With Europe planning to eliminate Russian energy imports by 2027, Russia is turning to China and India, but at huge discounts that bleed profit. To skirt sanctions, Russia relies on a shadow fleet of unregistered tankers, a risky and costly workaround that further erodes margins. Meanwhile, the human toll is catastrophic. Over 1.1 million Russian casualties since the invasion began, with daily losses climbing from 300 at the start of the war to over 1,300 by spring 2025. If that pace holds, Russia faces another 400,000 casualties per year. Recruitment is collapsing. Enlistment rates dropped 80% since 2024. Moscow has nearly exhausted its prisoner recruits and turned to North Korea for troops, a desperate and largely ineffective move. This war is hollowing out Russia's future. 3% of its entire labor force is now in uniform, and its demographic crisis, already severe from decades of low birth rates, is accelerating. The country's industrial base is short by nearly 500,000 workers, including 120,000 engineers critical to arms production. Military exports have cratered by over 90% since 2021, as global buyers lose confidence in Russian weapons that consistently fail on the Ukrainian battlefield. Once a symbol of military might, Russia's defense industry is now a cautionary tale. Geopolitically, the fallout is just as devastating for Moscow. NATO has only grown, stronger and more united. Finland and Sweden's entry cut off Russian access to key Baltic routes. Germany, once hesitant, has committed to spending 5% of its GDP on defense by 2035, an unprecedented shift. Across Europe, military cooperation is deepening, infrastructure is expanding, and NATO's collective deterrence is stronger than ever. According to Forbes, at Russia's current rate of progress, about 68 square miles of captured territory per month, It would take over 230 years to conquer Ukraine. And at current casualty levels, that hypothetical conquest would cost 100 million lives, roughly 70% of Russia's population. Clearly, the math doesn't work. The war won't last centuries. Russia's capacity will break first. What's remarkable is how much Ukraine has achieved without access to the West's most advanced systems. It has no stealth F-35s, no F-22 Raptors, no cutting-edge cruise missiles or nuclear deterrent. Much of what it received from NATO were surplus or retired systems. Yet in Ukrainian hands, they've become instruments of precision and ingenuity. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Decentralized innovation beats centralized bureaucracy. Ukraine's rapid prototype and deploy model runs circles around Russia's sluggish top-down command. Information warfare, deception, and adaptability have proven more decisive than sheer firepower. Every engagement demonstrates the same truth. Competence amplified by technology always beats technology alone. Logistics and decision-making speed have replaced brute numbers as the new metrics of power. 3 years ago, Ukraine was fighting to survive, clinging to independence by a thread. Today, it stands as a military power reshaping the very nature of modern warfare. Russia controls only about 18% of Ukrainian territory, land that costs it thousands of lives per day to hold and provides no strategic gain. Meanwhile, Ukraine's military-industrial base grows stronger. Its soldiers gain experience unmatched in Europe and its Western alliances deepen. Putin began this war believing he could rebuild the Russian Empire in days. Instead, he's orchestrated the greatest military humiliation since World War II. His special military operation has become an existential threat not to Ukraine but to Russia itself, a slow-motion collapse of military strength, economic stability, and global influence. Ukraine didn't just survive Putin's gamble. It turned his dream of conquest into a national catastrophe, and every passing day the price Russia pays for that mistake only grows higher.